I should have known it was going to be one of those days when my coffee spilled all over my blazer before I even left the house. But no, I told myself this was my chance. The biggest meeting of my career. The moment that would define whether I was climbing the corporate ladder or plummeting into financial ruin. So I changed my blazer, grabbed my notes, and bolted for my car. Rush hour in downtown Chicago is like a game of Russian roulette. You never know if you're going to make it or if some idiot's going to slam their brakes and cause a 6-car pileup. But I had timed everything perfectly, well, almost perfectly. I had exactly 23 minutes to get to the office, just enough time to park, breathe, and walk in like I had my life together. And then I saw it happen. A dull thud cut through the morning haze. A pedestrian, an older man, maybe late 50s, was lying in the street, his body twisted at an unnatural angle. A silver sedan had screeched to a halt a few feet ahead. The driver, some guy in a suit, looked panicked, his hands gripping the wheel like a vice. But he didn't move. Didn't get out. Just sat there, frozen. My stomach clenched. Every instinct screamed at me to keep driving. Keep moving. If I stopped, I'd be late. If I was late, I was done. But my foot had already hit the brake before my brain could argue. I threw my car into park, jumped out, and ran toward the man. "Sir? Can you hear me?" I asked, dropping to my knees beside him. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it was rattling my ribs. He groaned, his eyes fluttering open. My arm. His right arm was hanging at an odd angle, the bone clearly broken. Blood was seeping through the fabric of his sleeve. I swallowed hard, pushing away the rising panic. "You're going to be okay," I told him. "Just stay with me. Help is coming." I pulled out my phone with shaking fingers and dialed 911. The operator's voice was calm, efficient. I barely processed her words, just repeated everything like a machine: location, status, his condition. The driver finally got out of his car, looking like he was about to vomit. I didn't see him," he stammered. "He came out of nowhere. I swear." I didn't answer. I was too focused on keeping the man conscious, talking to him, making sure he didn't slip away before help arrived. Felt like hours, but it couldn't have been more than 5 minutes before I heard sirens in the distance. As the paramedics took over, relief crashed into me, leaving me lightheaded. I stepped back, hands shaking, adrenaline still surging through me. And then I checked my phone. 10 missed calls. 6 new messages. My boss. My assistant. Even the client. The meeting had started 20 minutes ago. I was screwed. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My breath came in short, uneven bursts, my mind racing. Maybe I can fix this. Maybe if I call my boss right now, explain the situation, they'll understand. Surely, saving a man's life is a reasonable excuse for missing a meeting? I tapped the screen and dialed. The phone rang once. Twice. Then, "Where the hell are you?" My boss's voice was cold, clipped. I had to stop. There was an accident. A man was hit by a car. I stayed to help. "Do you think our client cares about your heroics?" he snapped. "Do you think I care?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. I know this meeting was important, but you knew it was important and you still weren't here. A sharp exhale. The client walked out. "You just cost this company millions." My stomach dropped. "I'll come in now," I said quickly. "I can try to." "Don't bother." His voice was ice. "You're done." Call went dead. I stared at my phone, my ears ringing. Fired. Just like that. No discussion, no second chances. Fired for doing the right thing. Numb, I let my phone drop into my lap. A laugh bubbled up in my throat, but it wasn't a happy one. It was the kind of laugh you let out when life completely screws you over and all you can do is watch. I turned my gaze to the ambulance, which was now pulling away with the injured man inside. The world outside my car window continued as if nothing had happened. As if my entire life hadn't just crashed and burned in a matter of minutes. A knock on my window startled me. I turned to see a police officer, his expression neutral but firm. I quickly rolled down the window. "Ma'am, I saw what you did back there," he said. "That was good work." "Thanks," I muttered, though it didn't feel like a compliment. "Did you get the driver's information?" he asked. "We'll need a statement from you." I nodded and glanced at the silver sedan still parked nearby. The driver was talking to another officer, looking shaken but otherwise fine. "He gets to go home today." "I don't." I gave my statement, reliving every detail, the sound of the impact, the way the man's leg twisted, the panic in his eyes. The whole time my phone sat in my lap, silent. No second call. No reconsideration. My career was over. When I finally pulled away from the scene, my hands trembled on the wheel. I had no job, no backup plan, and no clue what came next. All I knew was that I had done the right thing. So why did it feel like I'd just lost everything? By the time I got home, exhaustion crashed over me like a tidal wave. I dropped my bag by the door and collapsed onto the couch, staring blankly at the ceiling. Fired. Just like that. I knew I should be doing something, updating my resume, reaching out to contacts, figuring out my next move, but my body refused to cooperate. Instead, I scrolled through my phone, reading and rereading the last message from my boss. "Turn in your keycard by end of day." No severance. No severance. That part stung the most. Years of my life dedicated to that company. Late nights, weekends, stress-induced migraines. And they tossed me aside like I was nothing. I should have been angry. I wanted to be angry. But all I felt was empty. A sharp knock on my door jolted me out of my thoughts. I frowned. I wasn't expecting anyone. Dragging myself off the couch, I opened the door and froze. Standing there, looking significantly better than he had a few hours ago, was the man from the accident. His left arm was in a sling, a few bruises shadowed his face, but otherwise he looked fine. Alive. Whole. And he was smiling. "Hi," he said. "I hope this isn't weird, but I had to find you. You saved my life today." I blinked. Yeah. I mean, I just did what anyone would do." His smile deepened, like he knew I was lying. "Most people wouldn't have stopped," he said. "But you did." He paused, glancing at my sweats and the empty coffee mug on my table. "You don't look like someone who just had a great day, though." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "You could say that." Something flickered in his expression, understanding, maybe. Then he extended his hand. "Thomas Reed," he said. "And I think I might be able to fix your bad day." I hesitated before shaking his hand. His grip was strong but careful, like he was holding something fragile. "You don't owe me anything," I said. "Oh, I definitely owe you," he interrupted, his eyes twinkling. "And I'd rather not do this on your doorstep. Can I take you to dinner?" My treat. I should have said no. I should have questioned why a total stranger, an injured total stranger, was showing up at my apartment offering me dinner. But I was too tired to argue. Too curious to ignore it. So I grabbed my coat, locked the door behind me, and followed him. I had no idea that decision was about to change my entire life. The restaurant Thomas picked was one of those sleek, modern spots where the lighting was low, the plates were way too big for the tiny portions, and the waiters all looked like they moonlighted as models. Definitely not my usual scene. We were seated at a quiet table near the window. I was still trying to figure out why a man I just pulled off the pavement was taking me to dinner when he set his menu down and gave me a look, serious but not unkind. "So," he said, "tell me what happened after I got carted off in that ambulance." I let out a slow breath. "Well, I missed my meeting. My boss didn't care that I was, saving your life, so he fired me on the spot. No severance. No second chance. Just hand in your key card and get out. Thomas's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted, like he was storing that information away for later. That's pretty messed up, he said after a beat. Yeah, well, that's corporate life. No loyalty. No humanity. I gave a dry chuckle. Guess I learned my lesson. He tilted his head slightly. And what lesson is that? That doing the right thing doesn't always pay off. His lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment I thought I'd made him uncomfortable. Then he leaned forward, resting his good arm on the table. You're wrong, he said quietly. I blinked. Excuse me. He smiled, but there was something sharp behind it. Doing the right thing always pays off. Sometimes just not right away. I wasn't sure what to say to that. Before I could decide, our food arrived. I picked at my overpriced salad while Thomas ate with the slow, deliberate pace of someone whose brain was working overtime. Through a few minutes of silence, he set down his fork and looked me dead in the eye. I have a job for you. I nearly choked on a piece of lettuce. What? I'm serious. He wiped his mouth with his napkin and leaned back. I just acquired a company, kind of a mess to be honest. I need someone sharp, fearless, and not afraid to stand up for what's right. He smiled. Sound like anyone you know? I stared at him. Wait, acquired a company? Who are you? His smile widened. Thomas Reed, CEO of Reed Enterprises. My brain short-circuited. Reed Enterprises. One of the biggest investment firms in the country. I had just spent an entire dinner talking to a billionaire, and he was offering me a job. I sat there, my fork frozen halfway to my mouth, staring at Thomas like he'd just told me he was an alien. You're joking, I said. Thomas grinned. I get that a lot. No, seriously. You're telling me that the man I pulled off the street today just happens to be a billionaire CEO who wants to give me a job? I shook my head. That sounds like something out of a bad Netflix drama. He chuckled. I promise you it's real. And so is my offer. I put my fork down and crossed my arms. Why me? You don't know anything about me. Thomas raised an eyebrow. I know that when you had to choose between your career and a complete stranger's life, you chose the stranger. That tells me everything I need to know about the kind of person you are. I opened my mouth, then closed it. Because what was I supposed to say to that? I don't even know what you're offering, I said finally. Or what your company does. Thomas leaned back in his chair, studying me. I recently took over a firm that's been having leadership problems. Previous management prioritized profits over people. I'm trying to change that, but I need someone who actually cares. Someone who's not afraid to do the right thing even when it costs them. A strange feeling crept over me, something that felt suspiciously like hope. What's the position? I asked cautiously. Director of Operations. I nearly fell out of my chair. That's a huge job, I said. I don't have the experience for that. You have more than you think. Thomas smiled. You ran projects, managed teams, solved crises. You built things while your old boss took all the credit. I did my homework on your company after the accident. I know exactly what they lost when they fired you. I exhaled slowly, trying to process what was happening. One moment, I was unemployed and spiraling. The next, a literal billionaire was offering me a leadership role at a major firm. It was insane. Completely ridiculous. And yet, you don't have to decide now, Thomas said. Think about it. Sleep on it. But if you're interested, come by my office tomorrow. He slid a sleek black business card across the table. I picked it up, running my thumb over the embossed letters. Reed Enterprises. Thomas Reed, CEO. This had to be a dream. But if it was, I wasn't sure I wanted to wake up. Sleep? Yeah, right. I spent the entire night staring at the ceiling, turning the offer over in my mind 100 different ways. On one hand, this was insane. Nobody just gets handed a job like this, especially not a top-tier executive position. I wasn't some hotshot business prodigy. I was just a mid-level employee who got fired for having a conscience. But on the other hand, what did I have to lose? By morning, I had made my decision. Dressed in the sharpest outfit I could throw together, I stepped into the towering glass skyscraper that housed Reed Enterprises. The lobby alone was bigger than my entire apartment complex. Everything gleamed: marble floors, chrome fixtures, massive digital screens displaying stock tickers and global market updates. I felt wildly out of place. The receptionist, a polished woman in a navy blue suit, greeted me with a professional smile. "Miss Carter." I blinked. Yeah. "Mr. Reed is expecting you." She gestured toward the elevator. "Top floor." I swallowed hard. No turning back now. The elevator ride felt like an eternity. When the doors finally slid open, I stepped into a space that was somehow both sleek and inviting. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Chicago skyline. A massive oak desk sat in the center, but Thomas was nowhere to be seen. "Glad you came." I turned to see him standing by the window, hands in his pockets. He looked different today, more put together in a perfectly tailored suit, but still carrying that same easy confidence. "I almost didn't," I admitted. He smirked. "But you did." I took a slow breath. "Tell me why I should take this job." Thomas nodded, like he'd been expecting the question. "Because you're exactly what this company needs." I crossed my arms. "And what's that?" "Someone who gives a damn." He gestured to the office. "The last guy in your role?" He cared about one thing: lining his own pockets. He cut corners, ignored ethics, and burned good employees to the ground. His expression darkened. "I don't want another corporate shark. I want someone who actually sees people." His words hit harder than I expected. I glanced around the office, trying to picture myself here. Could I really do this? Could I step into this role and actually make a difference? Or would I just be setting myself up for another fall? Thomas must have sensed my hesitation because he smiled. "Take the job, Carter. Let's prove that doing the right thing does pay off." I took a deep breath. Then, before I could overthink it, I stuck out my hand. "You've got yourself a deal." His grip was firm and sure as he shook my hand. "Welcome to Reed Enterprises." My first day at Reed Enterprises felt like stepping into an entirely different universe. The office was a whirlwind of activity: analysts shouting across desks, assistants speed-walking with stacks of reports, executives in high-stakes meetings behind glass walls. Unlike my old job, where everything was rigid and bureaucratic, this place buzzed with energy. I was quickly introduced to my team, a mix of sharp, overworked professionals who, frankly, looked a little skeptical about me. I didn't blame them. I was the outsider, the new boss nobody expected. And while Thomas had faith in me, the rest of the company didn't know me from a hole in the wall. The first real test came sooner than I expected. Midway through the day, I was reviewing reports when a young woman knocked on my office door. She looked nervous, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to be here. Hi," she said. "I'm Maya. I work in finance." I smiled. "Nice to meet you, Maya. What can I do for you?" She hesitated before stepping inside. "I heard you were different. That you actually listen to people." I raised an eyebrow. "I try." Maya glanced over her shoulder, as if making sure no one was watching. Then she lowered her voice. "There's something you should know. About the last guy in your position." I set my pen down. "Go on." She swallowed hard. "He was cooking the books." My pulse spiked. "What?" Maya nodded, speaking faster now. "I've seen the records. He was inflating numbers, hiding losses, shifting money around to make things look better than they were. It's bad. If the SEC audits us, we're screwed. I leaned back in my chair, my mind racing. This was big. Huge. Maya was right, we were sitting on a financial time bomb. I took a deep breath. Okay. Show me. She slid a flash drive across my desk. Everything's on here. I was scared to report it before, but I think you actually care. I met her eyes. I do. Maya nodded, looking relieved. Then please, do something before it's too late. She left, and I stared at the flash drive in my hands. This was it. My first real challenge. I could ignore it, pretend I never saw it, and play it safe. Or I could do what I always did. The right thing. I plugged in the drive. As the files loaded onto my screen, I felt my stomach tighten. If Maya was right, I wasn't just looking at some minor accounting errors. This was full-blown financial fraud. The deeper I dug, the worse it got. Hundreds of thousands of dollars shifted between accounts with no explanation. Falsified expense reports. Revenue that existed only on paper. Someone had gone through a lot of trouble to make sure the numbers looked good. I exhaled sharply. This wasn't just a potential scandal. This could sink the company. I didn't know Thomas well, but I knew one thing. He wouldn't stand for this. I grabbed my phone and dialed his number. He answered on the first ring. Carter. What's up? We have a problem, I said, keeping my voice steady. A big one. There was a pause. Then, come to my office. Now. Minutes later, I stood in front of Thomas's desk, watching his expression darken as he skimmed through the files. Son of a, he let out a slow breath, rubbing his jaw. I knew something was off, but this is worse than I thought. I crossed my arms. So what do we do? Thomas didn't answer immediately. He leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming against the desk. Then, finally, he looked up at me. We go public. I blinked. Seriously? Seriously? His voice was firm. We report it, clean house, and take the hit now before it destroys us later. I hesitated. That's going to be messy. He gave me a small, knowing smile. You afraid of messy? I smirked. Not even a little. Thomas nodded. Good. Because this is going to get ugly before it gets better. He picked up his phone. Call a board meeting. It's time to set things right. As I turned to leave, he added, and Carter? I glanced back. I knew hiring you was the right call. For the first time in days, I smiled. I had a feeling this was just the beginning. The board meeting was scheduled for the next morning, but by the time I walked into the conference room, I could already feel the tension in the air. The glass walls of the sleek, modern space were covered with high-tech monitors displaying financial reports and corporate data. Table was filled with executives, most of them older, more seasoned, with hard eyes that sized me up as soon as I walked in. Thomas was already seated at the head of the table, calm as ever. He gave me a brief nod when I entered, a silent reassurance that I wasn't walking into the lion's den alone. The room fell silent as I took a seat next to him, a few eyes still watching me like I didn't belong. I could practically feel the skepticism radiating off the board members. Thomas cleared his throat. All right. Let's get started. He motioned to me. Carter has something to present. We need to talk about some serious issues now. I glanced at the screen, where a summary of the financial fraud was now front and center. The numbers were staggering, the discrepancies vast. There was no denying what had happened. I stood up slowly, trying to keep my hands from shaking. What you're about to see is everything you need to know about the financial discrepancies in the company. It's not a mistake or a couple of bad decisions. It's outright fraud. A few board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but no one interrupted. I continued, my voice steady. Maya came to me with the evidence. She found files on a flash drive that show, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the previous management was embezzling funds, falsifying reports, and covering their tracks. It's been going on for months. A murmur rippled through the room, but the faces around the table were mostly unreadable. I clicked to the next slide, showing the timeline of the fraud and the pattern of money that had been siphoned off. The evidence was clear. Too clear. If we don't act now, we risk getting caught in a massive scandal that could ruin this company for good, I said, looking around the room. We need to be transparent. We need to report this to the authorities and get ahead of the story before it breaks in the media. If we don't, this will be the end of Reed Enterprises. There was a long pause. Finally, one of the older board members, a man with graying hair and a severe expression, spoke up. You're suggesting we go public with this? Risk our reputation and our shareholders? I held my ground. Yes, because if we don't, we'll have no reputation left to risk. This is our chance to prove that we're different, that we're committed to doing the right thing even when it's hard. Thomas interjected before anyone could respond. Carter's right. We've spent too long hiding behind profits. We need to rebuild trust with our investors, employees, and clients. And that starts with showing them we're serious about fixing this. There was an uncomfortable silence as the room digested his words. Finally, the chairperson, a woman with sharp glasses and a steely gaze, spoke up. You're asking us to do something unprecedented. Are you sure this is the right move? I'm sure, Thomas said firmly. And I'm not doing it alone. Carter will be leading the charge. She's already shown me that she's capable of making tough decisions, and this is her moment to take the lead. My heart skipped a beat. Leading the charge? Sounded almost unreal, but here I was, standing in front of the entire board, making a decision that could define the company's future. And then, to my surprise, the chairperson nodded. All right. We'll move forward with the disclosure. But know this, if we do this, we do it all the way. No half measures. I nodded. I understand. Thomas stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. I knew you'd do the right thing. Thank you, Carter. I swallowed hard, the weight of the decision settling into my chest. It was happening. We were going to expose the fraud, come clean, and rebuild from the ground up. And it felt like the beginning of something huge. The next few days were a blur. We set everything in motion. Disclosure statements went out to the SEC, legal teams were mobilized, and the media started to catch wind of the story. I was thrust into the spotlight in a way I'd never anticipated, answering questions from reporters, coordinating with the board, and overseeing the cleanup process. It was chaos. But the strangest thing happened amidst all of this madness. The more I took charge, the more I felt like I belonged. It wasn't just that I was good at it, though honestly I surprised myself. It was that I cared. This wasn't just a job or a paycheck. This was an opportunity to build something better, to fix what had been broken and prove that corporate success didn't have to come at the cost of integrity. By the end of the week, the news had hit full force. Headlines screamed about the scandal. Reed Enterprises was being investigated for financial misconduct. The stock price plummeted. And, despite the fallout, the company started to make waves in a new direction. Investors were rallying behind our transparency, customers were applauding our decision to come clean, and employees? They finally felt like they had a leader who understood them. But none of that mattered as much as the call I got that Friday afternoon. It was from the SEC. We've received your full report, Miss Carter, the agent on the other end said, his voice neutral. We've reviewed the evidence, and we're proceeding with an official investigation. We appreciate your cooperation in bringing this to light. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. That's a relief, I said. I just wanted to make sure we're doing everything by the book. You are. And I'll make sure we keep you updated as things progress. The line went dead. I sat back in my chair, staring at the phone for a few moments. There it was, proof. We'd done the right thing and the law was on our side. I hadn't just salvaged my career. I'd helped turn an entire company around. But the best part? I wasn't done yet. The following month, Reed Enterprises was back on its feet, maybe even stronger than before. Our stock prices slowly began to rise again, as people recognized the company's commitment to transparency. We made public pledges to improve our practices, invest in our employees, and hold ourselves accountable to the highest ethical standards. And through it all, Thomas never left my side. He was there every step of the way, offering advice, encouragement, and, strangely enough, a friendship I hadn't expected. I was working harder than I ever had, but I also felt like I had purpose. But then one day a surprise came. Thomas called me into his office. I sat across from him, trying to gauge his expression. It was harder to read these days. The man had a way of keeping things close to the chest. "You've done a hell of a job, Carter," he said, eyes focused on the papers in front of him. "I'm proud of what you've accomplished here." "Thanks," I said, unsure of where this was going. He leaned back in his chair. "I've been thinking about something. You've been running the day-to-day operations now for a while. You've proven yourself. More than I expected, honestly." I felt my pulse quicken. "Okay, what are you getting at?" Thomas smiled, a little devilish. "I'm offering you a promotion. You're going to be the new Chief Operating Officer of Reed Enterprises." I stared at him, my mind completely blank. "What?" He chuckled. "You're more than ready. You've built this company back from the ground up, Carter. You've earned it." For a moment, I just sat there, taking it in. The weight of it. The responsibility. The future. It was everything I'd ever wanted. And then I realized this was it. The moment I'd worked for, not just to get the job, but to make the job something worth having. I stood up, my legs shaky as I extended my hand. "You won't regret this," I said. Thomas grinned. "I'm counting on it." The end. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more incredible content.